I never thought a simple knock on my door could turn into the most unexpected thing in my life, but that's exactly what happened. It started that first night when I was almost asleep, and suddenly, tap, 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 someone was knocking. Not the usual errand at midnight kind of knock, but this slow, deliberate rhythm that made me sit straight up in bed wondering who on earth would be outside at 12:30 a.m. in a neighborhood where nothing ever happens after dark. I wasn't sure if I should ignore it or check, but curiosity won, as it usually does. When I opened the door, there he was. This guy I'd seen around the apartment complex a few times but never actually talked to. He had this quiet, almost shy smile, and eyes that seemed too warm for 1 a.m. "Hey," he said, like it was normal to be standing there, knocking on random doors in the dead of night. Hey," I said, still half asleep and trying to figure out if I was dreaming or if this was some kind of prank. "Do you need something?" He hesitated, then explained, "Sorry if it's weird. I didn't want to bother you during the day, and nights are quieter. I hope it's okay." That was the first time I noticed how soft his voice was. Like he wasn't just apologizing for knocking, but maybe for something else, too. We ended up talking for a few minutes, and I learned his name was Jamie. He lived a couple of floors down, and apparently, he'd been dealing with some stuff that made nights hard for him. I didn't expect him to knock again after that, but the very next night, same time, same knock, and the night after that, too. At first, I thought he might be lonely, or maybe just needed someone to talk to. But as the nights went on, the way he looked at me, the little smiles, the way his whole body seemed a little more at ease when I opened that door, it was different. It was like suddenly my apartment wasn't just my space anymore, but a safe place for him too. I couldn't explain why, but I started waiting for that knock every night. It was like this quiet secret between us, something raw and unspoken, growing in the silence between the taps on my door. That first week, I thought it was just some late night thing he needed. But then, I realized I was starting to want more than just a knock in the middle of the night. I wanted to know everything about the guy who showed up uninvited and somehow made the darkness feel less lonely. And that's where things got complicated, because the more I got pulled into Jamie's world, the more I found out he wasn't just some random stranger. He had secrets, scars, and maybe even reasons for coming to my door that had nothing to do with just needing company. So yeah, that knock changed everything. I just didn't know it yet. Jamie didn't just become a nightly visitor. After a few nights, he started lingering longer. Like, I'd open the door expecting a quick, "Hey, thanks for listening." But instead, he'd shuffle inside like he actually wanted to be there. Most nights, he'd lean against the door frame, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking around like he was trying to figure out what made my place feel different from wherever he'd just come from. One night, maybe the fourth or fifth time, I offered him a seat on my couch. He hesitated, then nodded. I didn't say much, just turned on the small lamp by the table so it wasn't too dark or too bright. "Why do you come here every night?" I finally asked, breaking the silence that had settled in. Jamie looked down at his hands and shrugged. "I don't know. It's safer here. You know, like my own place feels heavy sometimes, like the walls are closing in." I nodded because I got that feeling all too well. Everyone has their own demons, even if they don't always show them. "So, I guess that makes me your safe spot now?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood. He gave a small laugh, quiet but genuine. "Yeah, I guess you are." There was something about him that made me want to reach out, to offer more than just a couch and a little light, but I held back. I didn't want to scare him off. I had enough baggage of my own without dragging someone else into it. Over the next week, Jamie's visits became the highlight of my days. I found myself watching the clock after work, wondering if he'd show up, and most nights, he did. Sometimes he'd bring snacks, chips, candy, once even a small bottle of cheap whiskey. I started calling it our weird little midnight ritual. One night, about 10 days in, I finally dared to ask the question that had been buzzing in my head the whole time. "Why don't you want to be in your own place at night?" I said carefully, trying not to sound like I was prying. Jamie stared at the floor for a long beat before looking up, eyes suddenly sharper, more serious. "It's complicated," he said. I'm not exactly running from ghosts, but yeah. I guess you could say I've got some stuff in my past that makes being alone at night kind of unbearable. That was about as much as he was willing to give me, and honestly, I didn't push. I just nodded, letting the silence stretch between us. But after that night, something shifted. The knock on my door became more than a routine. There was this tension, like we were both trying to figure out what all of this meant without saying it out loud. One night, Jamie showed up looking different, like a weight had lifted off his shoulders. His hair was messier than usual, and he had this wild grin I hadn't seen before. "I got into a fight with my roommate," he said without preamble, dropping his bag by the door and flopping down on my couch. "So I'm officially homeless again." I blinked. "Again?" "Yeah, it's complicated." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to say something comforting, but all I could think was, "Why don't you just stay here? This place is your safe spot now, isn't it?" But I didn't say that. Instead, I grabbed a blanket and threw it over his legs. "Well, you're welcome to crash here if you want." He looked up at me, eyes wide, like he wasn't sure if I was joking or serious. "Seriously," I said, realizing how much I meant it. "You don't have to keep wandering around at night. Not if you don't want to." For the first time since those knocks started, Jamie stayed past midnight and past 3 a.m. We talked, really talked. About stupid stuff, about fears, about the ridiculousness of trying to adult. Things I never thought I'd say to some guy the first barely knew, but with Jamie, it felt easy. After that night, he started spending more time at my place. Not just at night, but afternoons, even weekends. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't in years. It was weird how quickly someone can slip into your life and rearrange everything. But, of course, nothing good is simple. One night, after a few weeks of this, Jamie didn't knock. Not at midnight, not at 1 a.m., not at all. I waited, my phone lighting up with empty messages I didn't send. The next day, I saw him outside, but he was different, closed off again, like the walls had swooped back in. I asked what happened, and he mumbled something about needing space. I was pissed, honestly. Not just because he'd left me hanging, but because I was starting to feel something that I hadn't planned on. I was falling for him, and it scared the hell out of me. I sat on my couch that night, staring at the door, wondering if he'd ever knock again. If he did, would I open it? Would things go back to how they were? Or would this be the start of something I wasn't ready for? All I knew was that every night without that knock felt a little colder, a little more empty. And maybe, just maybe, I was waiting for him to come back. Not just to my door, but into my life. A week passed with no knock, no message, no sign of Jamie. It felt like the apartment shrank around me, every shadow sharper, every silence heavier. I kept thinking about what I might have done wrong. Did I come on too strong? Was I too available? Or maybe I just scared him off without even knowing it. Then, out of the blue, late one afternoon, I spotted him sitting on the low wall outside the building, head down, hands clasped in front of him. I hesitated for a moment, but something pushed me forward. I approached, heart pounding like I was about to confess something big. "Hey," I said softly. He looked up, startled, eyes a little red, like he'd been crying or just fighting back tears. "Hey," he replied, voice barely above a whisper. We stood there for a beat, the kind of silence that holds something fragile between you but also fills the space with meaning. "Can I sit?" he asked, nodding toward the wall. "Yeah," I said, moving to make room. We sat side by side, the late sun warming the back of my neck. I didn't want to push, but the tension between us was thick. "Why did you disappear?" I finally asked. Jamie sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I guess I was scared. You're different from anyone I've let in before, and that scared me." "Different how?" He looked at me then, really looked, like trying to read all the parts one kept hidden. "You actually want to be around me, not just because you feel sorry for me, or because it's late at night and no one else is awake." That hit harder than I expected. I thought I was doing all this out of kindness at first, but deep down, I was craving exactly that. "I'm not sorry for you," I said quietly. And I'm not just here at midnight because I'm bored or lonely. His eyes softened, and for a moment, the walls between us cracked. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Being close to someone, letting someone see the messed up parts. Neither do I said honestly. But maybe that's the point. Maybe it doesn't have to be perfect. He shifted closer, and that simple motion sent my heart racing. Can we try? He asked. Yeah. I smiled. We can try. Over the next few days, things settled into a strange but comforting rhythm. Jamie stopped knocking at midnight. Instead, he just showed up, sometimes with coffee in hand, or a nervous smile, or a playlist he made for me. We cooked dinner together, argued over what movie to watch, and shared stories about our childhoods, mistakes, and dreams. One evening, as we sat on my couch, a little too close, watching the credits roll on a cheesy romantic comedy, Jamie reached out and took my hand. It was the smallest gesture, but it lit something up inside me I didn't know was waiting. You don't have to knock anymore, I teased. He laughed softly, squeezing my hand. I think I'm done knocking. That night, I fell asleep with his hand in mine, feeling like maybe, just maybe, all those taps on my door had been the start of something real. But as with all things that feel too good, the past has a way of catching up. About 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find Jamie pacing in the hallway outside my door, face drawn tight with worry. What's going on? I asked, grabbing his hands to stop him. He looked at me, eyes wild. I have to tell you something. Something I've been hiding. I waited, heart pounding. It's about why I really started coming to your door at night. And just like that, the quiet, safe spot I thought we'd built shattered, replaced by a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I could feel the weight in the air, thick and heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Jamie's hands were still gripping mine, but his fingers trembled slightly. I didn't want to push, but the way he looked at me, like he was teetering between relief and dread, made it clear he needed to get this out. Okay, I said, voice steady, even though my stomach was doing flips. You can tell me. He took a deep breath, eyes flicking away for a second before locking back on mine. The reason I started coming by at night, it wasn't just because I was lonely or needed a safe space. My heart sped up. Then what was it? Jamie swallowed hard. I was running from someone I thought I could escape by hiding in the dark, moving through shadows, but it never really worked. I blinked, trying to process. Running from who? He hesitated, then finally whispered, my ex. The words hung between us, loaded with all the unspoken pain. I'd known he had scars, but hearing this made it real in a way I hadn't expected. He wasn't exactly the nicest person, Jamie continued, voice cracking. Things got bad. I left because I thought distance would keep me safe. But sometimes, at night, I'd hear noises outside my place, or get texts I didn't want to read. So I started walking. Just walking, trying to lose myself. And then one night, I knocked on your door. I didn't know what else to do. His eyes were pleading now. I figured if I could just sit with someone who wasn't him, someone who made me feel something good, maybe I could breathe again. I squeezed his hands gently. Thank you for telling me. Jamie gave a small, shaky smile, but I could see the fear still lurking in his eyes. I don't know if he's still coming around, he said. I haven't seen him, but sometimes I worry. That's why I shut down those nights I disappeared. I was scared he might find me here. My mind raced. I wanted to protect him, but I also knew I wasn't some superhero. All I had was an open door, a couch, and a heart willing to try. I'm here, I said softly. Whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. He leaned into me, a breath of relief escaping, as if years of tension melted in that moment. From then on, things changed. Jamie started to open up more about the fights, the late-night terror, the times he'd barely made it out of a bad situation. It wasn't easy to hear, and it wasn't easy for him to say, but it was real. And real felt different, important. One night, a few days after his confession, we were sitting on my balcony, the city lights twinkling below like distant stars. Do you ever think about going back? I asked, breaking the quiet. Jamie shook his head fiercely. No, that chapter's closed. I'm done running. I took his hand again, fingers intertwining naturally now. Then, let's make sure you have a place to run to if you ever need it. Not away from, but with. He smiled, the kind that reaches the eyes and stays there. Deal, he said. But life has a way of reminding you that safety isn't guaranteed. A few nights later, just as I was drifting off, there was a sharp knock on my door, more urgent than before. My heart jumped into my throat as I padded over and opened it. Standing there was Jamie, eyes wide and wild, breath coming fast. I need to stay, he said, voice trembling. Please. I didn't ask questions. I just stepped aside and let him in. He sank onto the couch, hands shaking, and I pulled the blanket over him. What happened? I whispered. He looked up, eyes glassy but determined. He showed up at my old place. Said he wanted to talk. I told him no, but I'm scared. I sat beside him, hesitant but ready. We'll figure it out, I promised. As the night stretched on, we talked strategy, called friends, and made plans just in case. I felt this fierce protectiveness rising in me, like I couldn't let anything happen to this guy who had knocked on my door and changed everything. But more than that, I felt something else, something I hadn't admitted yet. I was falling for Jamie hard, and from the way he looked at me, maybe he felt it too. That night, as the city hummed outside, two scared guys found comfort in each other's arms, hoping that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The knocks had stopped, because now he didn't need to knock anymore. He had a place to stay, a place to breathe, and maybe, just maybe, a place to love. The next morning, sunlight slid lazily through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the room where Jamie was still curled up on my couch, the blanket pulled tight around him like a shield. I watched him for a while, how peaceful he looked when the weight of the world wasn't pressing down on him. It was a glimpse of the guy the first wanted to know more of. When he finally stirred, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, I offered him some coffee, which he accepted with a small, grateful smile. We sat in the kitchen, the silence between us easy, like it didn't need filling. So, I said, trying to sound casual, what's the plan now? Jamie sighed, taking a slow sip. I'm not going back. Not to that apartment. Not to that life. I'm done running. That was good. That was progress. But I could see the worry lurking beneath it all. Have you thought about talking to someone? Like, really talking? A lawyer or the cops? He shook his head firmly. No, not yet. I'm still scared. And honestly, I don't even know what I'd say without feeling like I'm betraying myself. I nodded, understanding more than I said. Healing isn't linear, and trust is the hardest thing to rebuild. So I said, a little sheepishly, if you're not going back, where do you want to go? Jamie looked at me with those eyes that seemed to peel back layers I hid even from myself. I want to stay here, with you. My chest tightened, warmth flooding in. I want that too. It felt like a promise, unspoken but solid. Days bled into weeks, and Jamie made my apartment his home in quiet, subtle ways. His toothbrush found a spot next to mine. His favorite worn-out hoodie hung on the back of a chair. We argued over whose playlist would be the soundtrack in the background while cooking dinner, and I found myself craving his opinion more than I expected. One evening, we sprawled out on the couch, feet tangled, popcorn scattered on the coffee table. The movie played, but neither of us really watched. Jamie's hand found mine, and the contact sent a spark that settled somewhere deeper, comfortable, familiar, but thrilling all at once. Hey, he said softly. Yeah? He turned his head to look at me, eyes glimmering in the low light. Thanks for not closing the door. I laughed quietly. You mean besides the one I open every night? He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the heart. Exactly that. I squeezed his hand, my fingers tracing gentle circles. You're not alone anymore, not unless you want to be. Jamie nodded, then rested his head against my shoulder. I could feel his steady breathing. And for once, the future didn't feel scary. It felt possible. But life, as it does, decided to throw a curveball. One night, just after midnight, there was a knock. Slow, deliberate. My heart skipped, and I realized it wasn't Jamie. It was someone else. I peeked through the peephole and saw a man standing there, face obscured by the dark, posture tense. "Who the hell is that?" Jamie whispered from behind me, his voice tight. I swallowed hard, feeling a rush of protectiveness. "I don't know." The man knocked again, louder this time. I stepped back, whispering, "Stay here." Jamie's hand found mine, gripping tight. I felt the tremble in his fingers, the silent plea. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man's eyes flickered with recognition when he saw Jamie. "Jamie," he said, voice low and cold. "We need to talk." My heart sank. The past had caught up. Jamie's eyes narrowed. "No, we don't." The man stepped closer, but I blocked the way with my body. "Leave," I said firmly. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel Jamie's pulse racing against my side. Finally, the man backed off, giving me a hard look. "This isn't over." And just like that, he disappeared into the night. I slammed the door shut and locked it, turning to Jamie, who looked shaken but resolute. "We'll handle this," I promised. He nodded, but the fear in his eyes was real. That night, we sat up talking, not about the future or dreams, but about safety, boundaries, and standing together. It was messy and raw, but it was ours. And as the sun rose, casting warm light on two people who had found each other through darkness, I realized something. No matter what knocks came at the door, as long as we faced them side by side, we might just be okay. It's about holding them shut when you need to protect what matters most. The morning after that confrontation was one of those rare moments where the world felt unsteady and fragile, like a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark lake. I woke up to Jamie already gone, the bed beside me cold and empty. His absence was the loudest thing in the room, and I found myself reaching out in the dark, fingers curling around empty sheets. My phone buzzed, a message from him. It was short, just a few words, but it hit me like a punch. "Need some air. Be back soon." I didn't want to leave him alone, but I also knew that sometimes people need space to breathe, especially when fear is choking them. I threw on some clothes and went to the window, watching the city below move with its usual hum, oblivious to the storm brewing in my apartment. The hours crawled by. I tried texting him, calling, but got nothing back. The silence was deafening. Eventually, around dusk, the door creaked open, and Jamie slipped inside, eyes red-rimmed, cheeks flushed from the cold. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, dropping his jacket on the chair and sinking onto the couch like he was carrying a 100-pound weight. "What happened?" I asked, sitting close. He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. I walked around the block a few times, tried to clear my head. But he was out there, watching. A shiver ran through me. The guy who'd threatened us hadn't given up. "I don't know what he wants," Jamie admitted, voice breaking. "Maybe to scare me, maybe worse." I pulled him close, wrapping my arms around him. "Whatever it is, we'll get through it." Together, he leaned into me, and for a moment, everything felt okay. But safety isn't a given. It's something you build, piece by piece. Over the next few days, we made small changes. I installed a smart lock on the door, bought a security camera for the hallway, and we changed the locks on Jamie's old place. We even talked about reporting the harassment to the police, but Jamie was hesitant, afraid the paperwork and the attention might make things worse. I could tell he was torn between wanting to fight back and wanting to disappear completely. It was exhausting just watching him wrestle with it. One evening after a quiet dinner, Jamie surprised me by suggesting we go out, just the two of us, to a small bar a few blocks away. I was hesitant at first. After everything, venturing out felt risky, but I could tell he needed a break from the constant fear. The bar was dimly lit, a bit cramped, but it had a warm vibe. We found a corner and ordered drinks, trying to push the tension down with light chatter. "Remember when we first started talking?" Jamie asked with a small smile. I chuckled. Yeah, you knocking on my door in the middle of the night like I was some kind of last hope. He laughed, the sound freeing and real. I guess you were. I reached across the table and took his hand. You're more than that now. His eyes softened. I'm glad I found you. We stayed there for hours, talking about everything and nothing, feeling the world blur away until it was just us. That night, walking back to the apartment, Jamie stopped and looked up at the sky. I'm scared, he said honestly. Scared that this isn't over. Scared that I'll never really be free. I pulled him closer, fingers entwined with his. I don't have all the answers. But I know one thing. We're stronger together. And I'm not going anywhere. He smiled, that genuine, shy smile that had grown on me like wildfire. When we got back inside, I realized something important. Love isn't about pretending the world won't hurt you. It's about choosing to face the pain together, even when the future feels uncertain. In the days that followed, Jamie started opening up more about his past, not just the dark parts, but the moments that made him who he was. The goofy kid who loved old video games, the dreamer who wanted to travel, the scared guy who just needed someone to believe in him. And I wanted to be that someone. One night, as we lay tangled in the sheets, Jamie whispered, I'm scared to hope. I kissed his forehead. Then I'll hold your hope for you until you're ready. He smiled sleepily, and I felt something settle deep inside. A quiet certainty. Whatever came knocking next, we'd face it side by side. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is let someone in and let them stay. Months passed, and the tension that had once gripped our lives gradually loosened its hold. Jamie and I settled into a rhythm that felt less like surviving and more like living. The knocks on my door, the ones that once echoed with fear, turned into laughter and quiet moments shared over late-night coffee. One chilly evening, we sat on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, and watching the city lights flicker. Jamie leaned against me, his head resting on my shoulder, and for the first time the past felt like a distant shadow, not a looming threat. I never thought I'd find something like this, he said softly. A place where I can just be, without running. I smiled, fingers tracing gentle patterns on his arm. You've always deserved that. More than you know. He turned to look at me, eyes reflecting the glow of the city. Thank you for opening your door that night. For staying. Thank you for knocking, I replied. It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic moment. It was simple, honest, the kind of connection built over shared fears, small victories, and unwavering presence. We didn't need perfect, we just needed each other. That night, as the stars watched quietly above, I felt something settle deep inside. A quiet hope, steady and real. The kind that isn't loud or flashy, but that fills the spaces between two people who've chosen to stay. Love, I realized, isn't about never being scared. It's about holding someone's hand through the dark and knowing they'll hold yours back. And sometimes, that's everything.